Puerto Rico. The breathtaking beaches, the vibrant culture, and the origin of Bad Bunny. Yeah, that guy. From catchy tunes to sold-out stadiums, Bad Bunny is a total global phenomenon, but there's much more to his story than meets the eye, because you see, Bad Bunny isn't just a chart-topping artist, he's also a citizen of a place with a bit of a complicated situation. That's right, folks. We're talking about colonialism. Now, before you tune out thinking, boring history lesson, hear me out. Because Puerto Rico's colonial status, well, it's got more twists and turns than a Bad Bunny music video. I'm your host, Will Luders. Let's buckle up, because we're about to take a deep dive into the history, the politics, the horrors, and the fight for self-determination in Puerto Rico.
But isn't this like a Bad Bunny class?
Well, yes, but I wanted to focus a little bit more on...
Then can we at least talk a little bit about Bad Bunny? It's Bad Bunny in Puerto Rico.
Yes, okay, we can make this work. We're going to talk about Puerto Rico and how artists like Bad Bunny stand up for the victims of the U.S.'s historical and ongoing colonization on the island. How's that?
Fine.
Yes. Columbus sails the ocean blue and discovers Puerto Rico, although it was already inhabited by the Taino indigenous people. Columbus promptly adds the island to Spain's list of global territories. It's kind of like finding a 20 in your laundry, only instead of dealing with laundry, it's a whole, island nation. Fast forward a few centuries, and Spain's grip on Puerto Rico starts to loosen a little bit. Now enter the U.S., fresh off a win in the Spanish-American War. Now, you might think they'd be in a good mood and they'd be like, hey, congrats on your independence, Puerto Rico. But nope. Instead, they annex the island from Spain as a result of the war victory, and, they soon pull out the Jones Act of 1901. This act basically says, well, you're kinda American, but not really. You get some limited citizenship benefits, but we control your trade and most of your government. Doesn't exactly scream American citizen. Well, through the 1900s, the U.S. tightened its control over Puerto Rican resources even more. They grabbed control of its finances and even its, own ability to govern itself. Sure, Puerto Ricans got some autonomy, but the real power, that was held by the U.S. So to answer the question, is Puerto Rico a colony? Well, based on looking on the past and its little history lesson, it sure doesn't exactly sound like a free and independent nation, now does it?
So how does Bad Bunny play into this?
I'm getting there. I'm talking about hundreds of years ago. Benito wasn't even born until...
Can you make this any more boring? Dude, no one's gonna watch this.
Will you stop? Oh, okay. Okay, fine. Enough history. For now, what can we do? I know. Let's hit the streets of LA to see what American citizens know about the current situation in Puerto Rico. We should get some pretty sophisticated responses.
Ooh, Can you repeat the question?
Wasn't that the 13th century or something?
Whoa. Wait, why did you cut back to me? You didn't even finish the interview section. I mean, it might not look like much now, but, if you resume the snippet, I think we'll at least get to quite a few intelligent responses.
So I don't really think I know enough information on that subject to give you a valid statement, so I don't think...
I didn't know anything about that.
I don't have thoughts on the colonial status of Puerto Rico. I know that it's a part of the U.S. somehow.
Huh?
That's it.
I actually don't really know anything about the colonial status of Puerto Rico, so...
Wow, I'm starting to see why. Wow. Is it a bit of a stretch to say that American citizens simply don't know a whole lot about Puerto Rico's situation? I mean, they just don't seem too convinced that Puerto Rico is a colony. This is going to be harder than I thought. Luckily, I have a whole PowerPoint presentation I put together that's precisely outlining...
Boring.
No PowerPoint. How else are we supposed to... Okay, you know what? Better idea. We need a better way to engage the audience. I think we need some more, modern day, present examples. People need to understand what has been happening in the recent years. I mean, it's really almost as if the US has tried to keep some of this stuff a secret from the general public, which actually might explain some of the nonsensical answers I was getting from their own citizens. Looking at Hurricane Maria in 2017, a Category 5 monster that slammed Puerto Rico, leaving a mountainous path of destruction behind, millions were left without clean water and power. But to set the stage, Puerto Rico has just entered a major debt crisis, just a few years earlier, fueled by massive tax breaks imposed by the US along with American investors who oversaturated the island. Bonilla and Lebrun, aftershocks of disaster, said that Puerto Rico's public debt, which eventually grew to more than $72 billion, helped lay the groundwork that made Hurricane Maria so devastating and the recovery so slow. The island nation is in deep financial trouble, and remember, Puerto Rico isn't a state, so they can't just declare bankruptcy and receive the same privileges like other U.S. states would be able to do. Ruined Nation by Hilda Urenz says that in Puerto Rico, societal vulnerabilities result from a long history of colonial subjugation, economic hardship, environmental injustice, and infrastructural neglect. Mostly by, you guessed it, the US. Like seriously, the last thing this island needs is a natural disaster. Okay, so, massive debt crisis, and then a destructive hurricane crushes the island. Ouch. The US's response, well, it wasn't exactly swift and responsive. While mainland US states received aid immediately following the aftermath, Puerto Rico was left waiting for months for proper aid to arrive. This is an entire island nation, mind you, that had no clean water, no working power, and a completely destroyed infrastructure system. Puerto Rico really needed urgent life-saving aid. However, according to Bonilla from 2020 Colony of Disaster, in post-hurricane Puerto Rico, this feeling of urgency was met with a crushing wall of inaction. Time passed and nothing changed. To give a sense of the kind of urgency that was needed, they say that some had to leave their flooding homes mid-storm and wade through chest-deep waters to find safety. Others have children who still wake up in the middle of the night, afraid that they or their parents might be drowning. It took almost a full year for the island to regain power. According to ABC, it's estimated that almost 3,000 Puerto Ricans had lost their lives both directly from the hurricane and its aftermath, which was largely due to neglect from the U.S. and their lack of aid allocation. But the sitting president called the U.S. response a success. A success? Doesn't exactly sound like much of a success to me. I mean, in what world is the U.S.'s handling of Hurricane Maria's damage to Puerto Rico a success? Bonilla from the Washington Post argues that Trump's claims are absurd. The death toll in Puerto Rico was not the result of simple wind and rain, but infrastructural failures that the Federal Emergency Management Agency has already admitted. Mass casualties are the product of structural failures and imperial neglect. Puerto Ricans died because of a lack of access to healthcare and medication. These deaths are tragic precisely because they were preventable. And Bonilla is right. These deaths were largely preventable. Even more recently, there have been investigations into private American companies exploiting the island and its resources for profit. A prominent example of this would be AES, an American power plant that operates in Puerto Rico. An article from the University of California Press did some digging and found that the plant generates at least 300,000 tons of coal ash every year. It seems concerning that not even American firms care the least bit about Puerto Ricans. 20-year-old Mabet, a Puerto Rican citizen, says that Puerto Rico government officials want to stop the spread of the coronavirus, but no one looks at the bigger plague that will continue killing us day by day for the following years. There is a bigger pandemic than COVID-19, and it only has 3 letters, AES. Coal pollution in polluted regions poses many serious health concerns and can even be lethal. But hey, it's not mainland US, so it doesn't count, right? US private companies and the American government actively discriminating against Puerto Ricans is, well, it's nothing new, really. In the early 1900s, according to the Oxford University Press, when Puerto Rico's assembly voted to allocate funds to help earthquake victims or to establish scholarships to encourage education, the Attorney General reportedly canceled the allocations as supported violations of the Jones Act. The territory was receiving 1/8 the amount that would go to a state under the Federal Emergency Relief Act. This past and present colonial discriminatory treatment of Puerto Ricans has really taken a toll on the citizens of the island. You know, I was reading this book the other day and, well, check it out. In the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, the 11th stated law of acquiring power over people is to keep people dependent on you. Makes sense, right? If someone depends on you for specific resources, natural or financial, then you have the power of leverage over them. Interesting, right? Now look at this. An article from Boswell says that Puerto Rico has become completely dependent upon federal government transfers. For example, food stamps and Medicare. Today, about 1/3 of all Puerto Ricans living on the island use food stamps provided by the U.S. government. This dependency inhibits a progressive work ethic and does not provide an incentive for Puerto Ricans to control their own futures. Making the same connection that I am, dependency is lighter fluid of a power dynamic, such as the one between the U.S. government and Puerto Rico. Fascinating stuff.
Okay, so talk about Bad Bunny now.
I'm one step ahead of you. Yeah, I think I nailed the look. Anyways, I did promise my viewers that I would make this entertaining and talk about Bad Bunny, and it works out because he's been very outspoken about the ongoing colonial treatment of Puerto Rico. He loves his home in Puerto Rico, as that's where he's lived and it's the home of his family, and he is certainly not afraid to make very public statements that reflect his deep love for Puerto Rico. He's been especially critical of the U.S.'s COVID relief stimulus plan on the island, as of recently. He said people are content with $1,200 while the government steals millions from them. Keep in mind, this was at the time when the funds had just been approved by the U.S. to people living under $75,000 per year for COVID stimulus. And look, I understand Benito's frustration, and it totally makes sense that he's upset. If my government treated me like the U.S. government treats Puerto Rico, then I wouldn't be content with the $1,200 check either. I mean, it's really like a bandage to a blood-gushing wound. Well, Bad Bunny's pretty awesome. Not only does he stand up for Puerto Rico in the face of present-day colonialism, but he also takes a stand against toxic masculinity, racism, and political issues across the globe. Overall, he's been a force for good and has inspired many artists to do the same. I think that him utilizing his massive global platform has inspired other artists in ways that we can't even imagine. Was that enough Bad Bunny for you?
Yeah, for now.
Okay, well, that's it. I hope you learned something about the current colonial status of Puerto Rico and found some inspiration from the passion that Bad Bunny and I both share about this subject. And I'm your host, Will Luders. Thanks again for tuning in.